Kyoto Animation is one of the most successful animation studios in Japan. They mainly focus on slice of life shows such as A Silent Voice, Clannad, K-On, and more. There are three studios within the company known as Studio 1, Studio 2, and Studio 5. Studio 1 tends to handle the animation aspect of the shows like the storyboarding, the character designs, and animation, while Building 2 is where the higher ups in the company work. I was unable to find information about Studio 5. Studio 1 is located in the Fushimi ward of Kyoto and would have around 100 employees working in the building at any one time. The building consisted of 3 floors and was like a communal office with everyone working at their computers. On July 18th, 2019, around 70 employees arrived at Studio 1 ready to start work just like any other day. As they sat down at their desks to start their day, they would have no clue that one of the most horrific attacks in recent Japanese history was about to take place. Around 10:30 that morning, a man approached the Studio 1 building, entering the building while pulling a cart with multiple full jerry cans. In silence, the man opens the jerry cans and starts to pour the liquid on the floor of the Studio 1 building. As he kept pouring the jerry cans, staff would ask the man who he is and what he is doing in the building. The man remained silent and splashed the liquid on the walls, furniture, and staff as he went along. The staff of the Studio 1 building would quickly realise this liquid was gasoline. Grabbing another jerry can, the man finally acknowledged the workers and started shouting "Die" as he doused more staff in gasoline. The man took out a lighter and sparked a flame, causing a massive explosion. The entire first floor was engulfed in flames, and a man began to run around in a sheer rampage, all while being on fire himself. Staff were trying their best to escape, but the man had poured gasoline in the doorways so that the flames would block their attempts to escape. He was still screaming "Die. Die" at people as he continued to pour more and more gasoline around the building. Within 30 seconds of the fire igniting, the entire ground and first floors were on fire. Within a minute, the third floor was on fire as well. Staff realised quickly they wouldn't be able to escape through the doorways. They attempted to make their way to the roof. At least if they were on the roof, they'd have some clean air to breathe. But the problem with this plan was that the staircases were designed with a spiral, which made it hard for people to try and get up the stairs at once. With the fire spreading within the building and consuming everything in the building, the smoke was thick and it was difficult to see through. People were falling over one another. People were falling over the furniture, and the fire was causing carbon monoxide to be released, and this was suffocating people. This caused some people to pass out on the stairs, making the attempts to escape for other staff more difficult. Within 2 minutes, the whole building was ablaze, meaning there was little to no time for the staff within the building to realise what was happening and make an effort to save themselves. The arsonist who started the fire decided that he would run out of the building. Through the doorways, he set on fire, out into the street, and was still on fire himself. Thankfully, there were 2 brave employees who refused to let the man get away with this crime. They ran through the flames after him and tackled him to the ground, pinning him so that he couldn't move until police arrived. Onlookers at the scene contacted the emergency services, and as soon as the fire department arrived, they began to tackle the blaze. In total, it took more than 5 hours to calm the fire. It took a further 20 hours to manage to kill the fire completely. At 6 a.m. on July 19th, 2019, The fire was finally out after having been lit at 10:30 a.m. the previous day. When investigators were finally able to assess the scene, they described it as something straight out of a horror movie. Bodies were all around the building, on each floor, and on the stairways. These people had been charred and were now unrecognisable. In total, 34 bodies were found. 20 of those were found on the third floor stairwell. They were so close to making it out to the building, but unfortunately never made it. Autopsies of the victims of the fire would reveal that many of the victims actually died as a result of the physical burns to their bodies rather than carbon monoxide poisoning. It is believed that the victims may have been conscious as they were burned alive. In house fire cases where lives are lost, smoke inhalation will often render a person unconscious before the flames reach them and burn them alive. However, in a Kyoto studio massacre, the fire engulfed the building so quickly that the smoke reached the staff at the same time as the flames, meaning many may have burned alive while they were still conscious. Because of the victims being burned in such a vicious manner, most of them were unrecognisable, and this made the identification process of the victims much harder. Many of them would need to be identified through dental records and DNA testing. While 34 victims had perished in the fire, 36 victims were transported to hospital. They were alive but severely injured. In critical conditions, thankfully, most victims pulled through their injuries and survived, although they needed multiple surgeries to stabilise their conditions. Sadly, 2 of the 36 that were transported to the hospital lost their lives after succumbing to their injuries. This raised the death toll to 36. This attack was dubbed the worst massacre in Japan since the First World War. Many of the victims were not made public. The president of Kyoto Animation believed that it was not the business of the company to make the names of the men and women who perished in the fire known to the public, and that it was best to respect the privacy of the families who lost their loved ones. The president thought that it should be known or down to the families of the staff that passed to go to the media if they should so choose. There are a few families of the victims that did go forward, so we'll talk about those cases here. Naomi Ishida, first of the victims to be identified by her family. Her body was located on the second floor and she worked as a colourist within the company. She worked with Kyoto Animation since she had left college. She was so passionate about her job and loved working with Kyoto Animation and worked on some of the bigger shows that the animation studio had worked on. Naomi's cause of death was ruled to be carbon monoxide poisoning. Naomi's family decided that for her burial, they would bury her wearing a dress they had hoped that they would see her be married in. Unfortunately, due to this attack, that day would never come. Yasuhiro Takamoto was 47 years old director, animator, and scriptwriter. After leaving animation school in Shibuya, Takamoto was able to get a job with Kyoto Animation and worked there ever since. Yoshiji Kigami was a 61-year-old animator, director, and storyboarder. He worked with other studios on other large projects before moving to Kyoto Animation. Futoshi Nishiya was a 37-year-old animator, director, and character designer that worked with Kyoto Animation since he had left college. All of the staff at Kyoto loved working for the company because they are notoriously good at taking care of their staff. The animation occupation in Japan is known to be very stressful and not always the best paid. However, Kyoto Animation would pay their animators well and take care of their staff. Young, up-and-coming animators aspired to be able to work at Kyoto Animation because they knew this company was one of the best to work for. In total, 36 men and women, employees of Kyoto Animation, died in this massacre. Along with the loss of life within the building, Kyoto Animation lost a lot of their materials. Their computers, their hard drives were lost. Some works were able to be recovered, but the setbacks the company faced as a result of the attack were huge. Now, let's talk about the man responsible for the attack. Thankfully, the two individuals that were brave enough to run through the blaze to tackle the man to the ground and kept him there until police arrived were able to keep him restrained, and so the police had a person of interest immediately. The police were not able to arrest the man straight away due to the fact he was also severely injured in the fire that is set. He was searched before being transported to hospital, and it was discovered that the man was carrying 6 unused knives. When the man first arrived at the hospital, he was unconscious and remained in a coma for several months. His condition was so poor that medical staff would pull police to the side and state that the chances of the arsonist's survival was very slim. Eventually the man would come out of his coma, but he would require a whole lot of surgeries. He needed a lot of skin grafts. The man had lost the ability to walk and talk, needing to learn how to walk and talk again. He also had several respiratory issues and required a ventilator. Organ donation is not a very common thing in Japan, meaning the 34 victims of the fire that were left needing skin grafts were prioritised over the man who started the fire. This left the man without any donor skin to be grafted onto himself, and so he became the first patient to be given a skin graft using synthetic skin. All of these treatments took 6 months to take place, and in this time, police opted to talk to the victims of the massacre. Surviving employees reported to the police that for around a year prior to the attack, they would receive emails from an anonymous web address, and they felt they could be linked. The emails did stop a couple months before the attack, so initially staff thought this person had given up. Around 200 emails were sent, and all of the emails contained threats to kill. These emails were sent to all employees that had public email addresses. Regardless of the reports to police, because of the methods used to protect the identity of the sender of the emails, it was impossible for the police to track down who was responsible for these threats. All the police were able to do in an attempt to protect the studio was send officers to the studio and patrol the building. When the emails ceased, the police presence stopped. This is why there were no police on the day of the attack. After waiting for 6 months for the treatments to take place, and for the arsonist to be treated, and well enough to be arrested, the police were given the green light to go in and detain the man. His name was Shinji Aoba, aged 41 years old. Shinji confessed multiple times to being the one responsible for the fire, and he even gave police the motive for his crime. It is worth adding, in 2012, Aoba committed an armed robbery with a knife and demanded money, later handing himself into the police, to which he was sentenced to 42 months in prison. Aoba's motive for this crime, according to the verdict, was attributed to, quote, feeling tired of living in society for reasons including unreasonable treatment at work. Aoba received a lighter sentence for that crime, due to turning himself in at that time as well. Now, upon release, Shinji spent a lot of time in a halfway house, which is accommodation for people leaving prison, which aims to support an inmate's reintegration into society after release. They help the person to find work as well as provide them with meals and rent. Eventually, Shinji would have to find his own accommodation, and so moved out and began to rent an apartment. Neighbours at the new apartment site would recall that Aoba was a recluse, Someone who was very rude, ignoring neighbours greeting him when they crossed paths, ignoring noise complaints. He seemed to be dirty, not bathing for large stints at a time. He would wear the same clothes for long periods of time. So why did Aoba do it? Kyoto Animation holds an annual competition where fans can submit stories that they have written. The winner of this competition will win the privilege of having their stories turned into a manga or a TV show. The winner of this competition also gets awarded a cash prize, but I was unable to find out what the cash prize was. It was discovered that Shinji had entered this competition multiple times, once in 2017 and again in 2018. Neither of these submissions passed the first round. In this competition, a computer would decide if the format that the applicant had submitted was correct. If a computer deemed it to be incorrect, the submission would be discarded, and then the eligible applicants would be sent forwards for human review. This means that none of the staff at Kyoto Animation had seen Shinji's works, and for lack of a better term, didn't know that Shinji even existed. Not winning the competition for 2 years in a row was not what had angered Shinji and spurred him to commit the crime, but what does appear to be the catalyst seems to be that in the start of 2019, Aoba was sitting at home watching a new show that had been released. As Shinji watched the show, he recognised the show but couldn't possibly have watched it before, as the show had only recently begun premiering. This is when it clicked in Shinji's mind. He recognised the show he was seeing as his own work. This was his work that had been rejected. Aoba believed that this submission was stolen, and that Kyoto Animation told him he had been unsuccessful so that Shinji would receive none of the profits from its creation. This angered Aoba unconditionally, and it is believed that this is when the email threats began to arrive in the inboxes of Kyoto Animation's staff. This is alleged, as there is no way to prove the identity of who sent the emails at that time. The scene Shinji believed to have stolen was a generic scene of characters entering a stall to purchase food. It is thought that with Shinji being in a fragile mental state of mind at the time, that led to him believing something that was not real. Police used CCTV around the studio and traced Shinji's movements from the time he had arrived in Kyoto until the time he committed the massacre, and it was found that he stayed at a couple different hotels and visited some manga shops. On the day of the attack, Aoba is seen on CCTV at a gas station 6 miles away from Studio One, where he purchased 40 litres of gasoline and loaded it into his cart. From here, Aoba started the 2-hour walk to the Studio One site. Information from here: Aoba was charged with arson, attempted murder, murder for the massacre in 2020, and due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it was reported that he was yet to stand trial. Of course, we now have information on this in 2024. He's undergone psychiatric evaluations multiple times to prove he is of sound mind, fit to stand trial. In Japan, death penalty permitted in murder cases, but we do have information on this now. What was left of the Studio One building was demolished in April 2020, roughly a week after the arson. Kyoto Animation CEO Hideaki Hata said, "If it is possible, I would like to turn the site into a park and erect a monument," but the neighbourhood itself is now saying it doesn't want that. The Neighbourhood Association of a section of Kyoto's Fushimi Ward's neighbourhoods, where Kyoto Animation's arson-struck studio is located, submitted a written request to the company specifically asking that the site not be used for any sort of memorial. The association expressed concern that a memorial would continually attract large numbers of mourning fans. If large numbers of people are continually visiting the site, it will destroy the peaceful lifestyle of the peaceful residents, the request read. On July 18th, 2021, 2 years on from the attack, a memorial was held. Kyoto Animation's YouTube channel live streamed a 13-minute video to provide a place for everyone to share their thoughts and feelings. In the video, were messages and tributes from the studio itself, staff members, and the families of the deceased. Now, as of January 25th, 2024, 5 years on from the attack roughly, it is officially reported that Aoba has been sentenced to death. He has pled guilty to the, quote, attack, but his defence team wanted to push for a lighter sentence on the grounds of, quote, mental incompetence. Thankfully, the judges rejected this ruling that Aoba knew what he was doing. Here is a quote from Chief Judge Masuda. I have determined that the defendant was not mentally insane or weak at the time of the crime. The prosecutors were reported to have, quote, demanded the death penalty for Aoba, saying his motive was to attack the studio after believing his work had been stolen. During Aoba's September 2023 guilty plea, Aoba said he did not think so many people would die, and that, quote, I felt I had no other option but to do what I did. Aoba also said, I feel tremendously sorry, and the feeling includes a sense of guilt. And finally, according to an article written on January 27th, 2024 from the Asahi Shimbun, Aoba is quoted saying, he solemnly accepts the death penalty, which is a fitting conclusion to this tragic tale. I would just like to thank everybody for watching the video on this channel. It's the first video. All the resources will be in the description. I'll try and get everything as much as I can in there. Any further information will be in the about section of the channel, including social media links if you'd like to follow anything further there. If you want to subscribe, just hit subscribe. If you wish to like the video, hit like, dislike if you dislike it. Thank you very much for watching.